Welcome everybody. There will probably be the odd late comer. The door I thought was shut just so everybody gets in. One snag in a new building. If that's all the snags we get, I'll be out half an hour. I'm Jerry Smith. I'm one of the trustees of this place. Going to a particular workshop. Okay. I think you've heard all the domestics housekeeping announcements downstairs, so we're not very unclear. Without further ado, I think we'll move to what this workshop's about. It's about community land transfers. It's called. That's a kind of a slightly formal title. We will hear about that in a moment. But also, it's really what we're really looking at is how communities can take over land and make use of it. That's the kind of general approach, and we'll have two contrasting approaches to that from our two speakers, and hopefully plenty of time before we break for lunch for you to contribute your knowledge and ideas. I'm sure there's an awful amount of experience and interest and knowledge in this room as well, apart from the very good speakers we've got. So I won't waste any more of your time. I'll introduce first of all Pam Warhurst, who's incredibly able to we'll talk about the experience that they've had of bringing land into use and just the valley from here.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. Yeah, this is about how far you can go, if you want to, without actually asset transferring. There's strengths and there's weaknesses in that, but it does tend to whet your appetite for seeing spaces in a different way and potentially thinking, okay, now's the time for us to be big and brave about some other things. So, this is Todd, without the rain, and these are some of the spaces, and this is just a whiz through of like Pam's holiday shots really, of what Todd looks like now with the spaces we've taken over as a community to grow fruit, veg and herbs on. Now, that's the canal bank, as you can see, and these are just planters that were there for the In Bloom group, which we kind of took over and planted a heck of a lot of veg in. Just wanted to pause on that because this is a movement that's not just about growing veg. This is a movement about seeing your space differently. This is a movement about realising you can do a hell of a lot without asking people's permission to do it in the first place. This is a movement about, hey, I can do something positive. It's not all about being negative. In face of what are some really big issues around not only how we spend our money and what quality of life we've got locally, but the whole state of the planet, of which we are one little dot, but nevertheless a dot that can do something. This started for a really simple reason. This isn't to talk about Incredible Edible, this is just to talk about space and logistics. The reason we didn't go into asset transfer is it just takes too long at times to get going. And we needed to demonstrate really early doors, about 3.5 years ago, that it is possible to change the world one step at a time. It is possible to take over spaces, one space at a time. And you don't have to go and write a report, and you don't have to create a strategy, and you don't have to fill in a form, and you don't have to talk to the local council, or British Waterways, or anybody else for that matter. You just do it. Because ultimately, my message is, who's going to complain if you, from your own resources, improve your space around you? You've got to be seriously bonkers. And I would like to challenge anybody that wanted to do that anyway. Now, we've not always done it without telling people. On occasions we do, because we're not completely stupid. But we seldom take no for an answer. So I'm just going to whiz through some things that can be done really early doors. Take the canal towpath, for example. Now, I know they're transferring it over, and it's the Canal Motorways Trust and doing whatever, and people are going on stretches of the canal. That kind of like takes forever to go through consultation. I don't do consultation on the whole, I just do. And people kind of like get in the slipstream and just really do it as well. So what we decided to do here was the canal towpath is sacrosanct. Quite rightly too, because you need to be able to walk with your buggies or your cycles or whatever it might be. But the bit next to it actually isn't sacrosanct. And it was more or less taken over by dogs and cans. So what we did was take the canal towpath there and we did get some dosh. We got some dosh from the People's Millions to do that. But we'd done a heck of a lot of it without People's Millions money. We just got some wood that was in a skip, and we started to mark off the territory. We planted fabulous edible flowers, we planted herbs, we've got apricot trees, we've got all sorts of things. And what we've built now with a local sculpture is a waggle dance framework, which is great, I'm just going to tell you. So the kids go in at this end, and they follow this little path round, and by the time they've got to the other end, it says, you've just done the bees waggle dance, well done. So it starts to introduce people to a different way of thinking about the importance of the land around them. These are some people that are working on the canal. We never asked British Waterways whether we could do this. And every time I presented it to British Waterways, because there's no point in doing this and being frightened to confront people once you've done it, that would be a real wimpish thing to do. So every time I've talked to British Waterways, whether it's the chair of British Waterways or whether I've been presented at a conference that they're at, they love it. Because it's not cost them a sausage, and we've improved the facility for the general public. We've also put signs upon walls and stuff like that. Then this is a bit of land. It was a verge opposite the cricket club, if anybody knows it, on Burnley Road in Toberdon. And it was a dog toilet. And it was where people just used to hang around and throw their cans and let the dogs do whatever they wanted. Never looked after by the council, never mowed, never anything like that. So we took it over, we cut it back, we planted it up, and blow me, within 12 months, the council started mowing it, and now we've got a bench there for people to sit in. And it's not a dog toilet, and it's not vandalised, and it's just a stretch of land that we just took over. And these are one of our propaganda, help yourself to herbs and veg sites. So people just come along and cut whatever they want. It's really simple. None of this is rocket science. It's just inclusive because anybody can do it. This is a bit of land at the back of the health centre in Toberdon. Now, we did ask them about this. They would have noticed that we were digging up their car park. So we asked them if it was all right if we put flowers and herbs and fruits around the health centre instead of a brand new health centre being surrounded by prickly plants, which is completely useless. And they said yes, provided it didn't cost any money. So now we took over the back, and they gave up in car parking spaces. It's on the canal, as you can see, so people can come through. It's a place you can chill, it's a place you can pick, it's a place you can just enjoy. We did the same at the police station, again with some wood that we just took over the strip. We said, do you mind us doing raised beds? He said yes. So again, we plant corn, we plant potatoes, we plant all manner of things, and the police help us look after them. Nobody ever, had to pay anything from Colterdale Council for this to happen, but suddenly we've got veg growing in the middle of our towns, and we've got conversations, and we've got a stronger sense of place. Took over the beds at the planters at the railway station where we're growing herbs. Did the same at the corner of the car park of the railway station where we've got pick your own veg. People get off the train, before they get in their car, they can come and help themselves to a range of salad crops or whatever else it might be. We funded that. We never asked anybody, we just did it. The front of the health station, at the health centre, as I say, we've got an orchard, we've got, it's very modest, they're not big things, but kids are now walking through an edible landscape and helping themselves to food. It didn't cost the health centre a penny, we did our own fundraising. That's the apothecary garden at the back. Then there's the land at the high school. Now this is interesting because anybody that knows around schools and a lot of public buildings, there's still land, it's not all been flogged off. So the land that we've got at the back of the high school, we approached them. After a lot of negotiation with Colterdale Council, we've transferred that on a lease now, and we're putting up an aquaponics unit there. It's run by a social enterprise with the community in the high school. We'll be growing fish and veg and in an orchard of fruit and bees, and that'll be what it looks like come October. The kids are building it with us, and they're on the board as well. We've never actually asset transferred anything. Then here's a little bit of land here, which is at Walsden. We wanted to take some sort of experience forward for the kids that are learning BTEC in agriculture at the school. What are they actually going to do? How are we going to get horticulture and growing food taken seriously? So we went to Gordon Riggs, who is a local garden centre, and asked them if they'd got anything. They've got this really mushy land by the side of the canal, but because they were supportive, and obviously their business has boomed as a result of what we're doing, they gave us this land. We actually haven't got a formal lease for it. You might think we're completely bonkers, but it's true. We were given some money to put a fence around because there's lots and lots of deer and rabbits around that. And what we've created now is this on that land, which is the Market Garden Training Centre. So the kids from the high school can come here. We've also got community beds, we've also got a wildlife corner. Not asset transferred anything, we've just done it. And these are the kids doing their stuff. And then the other thing we did, and I'm nearly at the end here, is say, okay, what can we do with small actions and small spaces to actually do something to give a boost to the economy? Now, because we've got these propaganda gardens all over the town, from college beds to what you saw in terms of that ex-dog toilet to the police station and whatever, we've got vegetable tourists. So for tourists come from literally all over the world to poke around in beds, quite often when there's absolutely nothing in them. And we've got film crews from all over the world. So we created an incredible edible green route. The idea would be that you start off at the railway station and you walk around the town, you walk past small shops and cafes, you walk through the market, and every spot that you walk through has got an exhibition garden, or it's telling you something about the importance of what's growing there, or it's showing you how to do things differently, or it's a really nice site to just sit in. With some dogs that we got from the lottery, and again, we've not asked British Rail about any of this, but they're totally fantastic, designed by Western. These are bird, bug and bat houses. We've got about 6 of those all around the railway station now that explain to people what's happening. And what's happening as a result of doing this is other people like the In-Bloom groups are also improving the environment immediately around. This is what we call Pollination Street. This is Rose Street in the middle of Tottenham. It was really contentious about what was going to happen, once the development agency collapsed, what were they going to do. What we do not want here is a building that goes right up to the market and just takes away that fabulous view. So we've persuaded the council. We've not got any written contract. They could take it away from us at any moment, but nevertheless we're making a strong statement that says we want edibles here, we want flowers, we want fruits, we want people to be able to pick their stuff. That's an exhibition being had. We don't have bees in the middle of the town. And that's what we've got now. That's the real picture. It will look totally fantastic. And once you establish something that's really positive, that the community really likes, it's really quite hard for the powers that be to actually want to take it away from you. And that's the theory. That's the Waggle Dance sculpture again. And to finish, because we were doing so many things, and because we weren't legged up in council reports and endless committee things and legalities and God knows what else, people like the developers from Christchurch came over after the earthquake there and started to incorporate some of the really incredible edible principles there, which is get a community doing stuff that's positive, get some skills behind that so people know what they're doing, infiltrate the schools, and then persuade people to spend money in the local economy. Those are the principles of Incredible Edible. We've done everything we've done without asset transferring a single thing. There's a lot you can do. There's a point at which you have to stop and be brave and perhaps do something bigger and better. But if you want to get the community behind you and have a sense that they can do it, it is possible, and stop thinking of the 2001 reasons why it's going to be really quite too difficult to do it, then this is a good entree to getting people motivated. Thank you.
There's plenty of food for thought there in every sense of the word, and that was not a deliberate pun. Are there any questions of clarification before I hand over to Tom? We'll get into the discussion later, but just anything that you didn't understand or want to check on. Okay. So Tom, I think, is pretty much ready. Tom Archer is from a company called Locally Made, provided for an organisation called Community Development Foundation, which many years ago, the previous life I was still working for. Tom has been involved in Community Land Trust, a more formal approach, I guess, particularly in areas of housing deprivation, and I think most people are going to talk about. And we'll have a discussion before lunch.
Great, thank you, Jerry. I feel mildly guilty. I was just saying to Jerry earlier, I don't have any fluffy cats or pink buckets or anything like that. I have no props, I'm afraid, so I apologise in advance. Hopefully this will complement what Pam's just spoke about, really. This is at the more kind of formal end of land ownership through the means of community land trusts. And I know that some of you will know a bit about that, others less so. So I'll start with a brief introduction about CLTs. I'll then talk about some of the areas where it's starting to get exciting and some new areas in which CLTs are starting to develop. Talk about some of the opportunities and challenges. And then the final slide, I ask myself the question, what would I do if I wanted to set up a CLT or explore a CLT in my area? What are the 5 steps? So I tried to summarise that on the last slide. So there is a legal definition for community land trust, and unless you're fond of squinting, I was quite keen not to put that up. So this is the kind of layman's version. A community land trust really is just a legal way for a community organisation to acquire and manage land and assets for community benefit. It holds those assets in perpetuity, although it can sell them or develop them if that's in the community interest. It's not for profit, so it uses its surplus for further community benefit. People that live and work in an area should be able to become members, so it's open membership, and those members control it, and there are kind of governance systems for So the community land trust movement is growing really quite rapidly actually in the UK. There are over 100 now, and the map here is the kind of where they're spread over England. The colours denote what stage they're at basically, and the key colour, which you may struggle with, is the blue ones, which have developed housing, because it is in England a largely rural and largely housing orientated movement. So that has grown in the last year by 25% the amount of CLTs that there are in England. They've developed a small number of houses, 180 odd, but I think to just focus on that really undersells some of the social benefits of having a CLT in your area. It's not just about housing. And finally, over the last 2 or 3 years, there is a much better support network now for people that want to set up CLTs in the form of the CLT network, which lobbies and provides resources for CLTs, and also a CLT fund as well for advice at the start, and also some loan finance. So let's step back a moment and think about the context. And some of this actually was covered this morning. I've kind of stolen bits of my presentation, which is rather annoying. But I think there will be those of you who are open-minded about policies like policies around localism, the ideas around the big society. There will be those of you that are slightly more cynical. I won't ask for show of hands because I think I'll get into trouble. But we can't deny that those policies are creating some space. So as the public sector and its spending and services retreat, and as the private sector retreats, it creates a space in which organisations like CLTs are starting to form. And it's no surprise that things like cooperatives, their turnover is growing at double the rate of the UK economy. So I think that is a sign that cooperation and collective action is increasing. Now, CLTs, as I just said, have largely focused on rural, affluent, high land value areas in the UK, which is really important work because it's about providing affordable housing to people that are priced out. So if you live and work in an area that you can't afford to buy because prices are so high, it's really important that CLTs can provide housing for those communities. The problem is, and this is the crux for me, the impact of a recession hits hardest in urban, poor areas. So for us that are interested in CLTs, but also interested in more political ideas like social justice, we want to know whether CLTs can be applied in these areas. And I think that over the next couple of years, we'll start to see an increasing number of urban CLTs that are starting to transfer assets over. And I'll talk about one of those now, which is a CLT that is formed in an area of Liverpool called Home-Baked CLT. It's actually in Anfield. And it was an area that was programmed for a lot of demolition under housing market renewal. And as that funding ends, the kind of plan kind of disintegrated a little bit, if you like, and the CLT has stepped in. They're taking over an old bakery and bringing that back into use as a bakery and refurbishing some adjacent houses to provide some affordable housing and commercial space. Now, one of the brilliant things about this CLT is that the engagement of young people in the area, because there is a relatively low young demographic in that area, has been fantastic, really involved in planning the space and the refurbishment process for that building. And I should say, actually, as an aside, we have some funding to work with early stage urban CLT. So if any of you are particularly interested in this urban model, either grab me at the end or perhaps Jerry can give you my email address. So let's go general again to all CLTs. What are some of the key opportunities now for organisations and people that want to create CLTs? Well, there are financial problems, which I'll cover on the next slide, but there are financial opportunities as well. And some of the small government pots of money can be accessed by CLTs. So some of the groups I'm working with have been into the Empty Homes funding. There is this pot set aside specifically for community groups. Some of them are bidding to the community-led funding, community-led development funding run by the Homes and Communities Agency. And others will tap into some of this funding to develop right to build schemes. I think some of the real opportunities lie in, bearing in mind the conversation this morning about risks and what is an asset and what's a liability, there will be potential for more transfers in these regeneration areas because partly because the funding through the regeneration areas, through the regeneration schemes, is not there anymore. So local authorities are stuck with this job of trying to do something in the face of very little money, and that will create opportunities, but there will need to be careful thought about whether to take on assets that were earmarked for demolition for a reason. So linked to that is that local authorities are increasingly receptive in some of these areas, and as I said, there are strong support networks that are improving all the time at both national and local levels. And finally, some of the current policies and some of the, I think, the future policies are going to support this further. The challenges that some CLTs are going to face are as follows, really. There are reduced subsidies to build social housing, which a lot of the early CLTs actually tapped into. Lending is a challenge at the minute, but I know that's something that the CLT network is trying to help with. There's no running away from the fact that CLTs are they're quite complex things to set up, and that places a real demand on volunteers in terms of their time, and their skills and their knowledge. In rural areas, this has always been a problem for the CLT movement. Access to the land to be able to build in the first place is a challenge. And finally, whilst the support networks are improving, it is a bit of a postcode lottery. So if you're based in Yorkshire, there is much less local support than if you're based in Cumbria, which has a dedicated development workshop for CLTs. So just to finish off, how would I approach it, exploring CLTs if I was wanting to set them up in my area? Well, I think this was touched on this morning and by Pam as well. I think it's actually about saying what problem are we trying to address, and then thinking about the best solution to that, because it's easy to get caught up in the kind of fashion of CLTs. You know, there will be times when it is a suitable model to address a local problem, and others when it's not. I think at an early stage, I would look to say what land is available, what do we want to develop, and what can we access. Secondly, I think that then there's a crucial step to exploring local support for the idea, because it's not going to happen without that. And then I think you can start to access some of the support through the CLT fund and the CLT network that provide days for feasibility studies and technical advice. And it's only then, I think, that you really get to the detailed planning stage. And interestingly, that quite neatly fits with the guidance on self-to-build if you want to go through that process. So, happy to take questions at the end. There's a slide here which is the contact details for some of those organisations. So I'll leave that up.
Fine. Thanks, Tom. That's great. Okay, open to you now. I'll sit here for a minute. I think we'll just take any questions. Just raise your hand, and could you say who you are and where you're from before you ask whatever you want to ask or say whatever you want to say, and try to keep it fairly brief. We've got about 20 minutes till lunch, so hopefully enough time for a reasonable discussion. So, Simon.
Yeah, I'm Simon Chisholm from Resonance. I just wanted to add something really to the last presentation, hopefully just as a comment that will add to the debate, particularly around financing for CLTs. Resonance is a social finance organisation, and one of the things that we've been focusing on is raising a fund that can potentially invest into CLTs, where they're seeking to do affordable rental housing for local people. So I think it probably just adds to what was said in the presentation, that up on the board there, I think the CLT fund is the kind of funding that can take one of these things to the first stage of actually getting some planning permission and a project in place. Gap that we've identified is that at that point it can be very difficult to get 100% of the funding needed to construct the project, either because there's no track record for the CLT, or because even if there's lending available, it may only cover maybe 60 or 70% of what's needed to actually construct a project, leaving a big gap for grant funding, which is often difficult to find. So it's really just a flag that at the moment we see that as a gap in the financing market for CLTs. We hope that there's a kind of product there that can now be used where CLTs need to get to 100% of the financing for an affordable rental home in their community. I've got some details of that if people are interested in talking about it afterwards, but hopefully it kind of adds to and amplifies some of what you were touching on.
Yeah, so just a small point to add to that, which is I think that making the finances bank in CLT is currently requiring piecing together lots of these plans, particularly at the start when you're trying to cover some of the initial site surveys and things like that. So yeah, that's useful to have. I didn't know that.
And maybe one thing to add on top of that is it can be sometimes quite helpful if one is applying to something like the CLT fund or other kinds of early stage development funding, if one can evidence the fact that after that stage there will be a viable financing plan. And that's again where something like this might be quite helpful, because it can basically answer that question that yes, a project could be financed to the next stage after development.
I've got some other people who want to come in, so thanks Alan. There also, of course, there's a workshop stream on finance this afternoon, so I think we can perhaps return to some of the issues in one of those workshops as well.
Yeah, Brian Morris, Keeper Town Council. First of all, congratulations at Todberton. I think you've done an absolute super job on there. I'm the chair of allotments at Keeper, and you know, we're jealous. Going on to CLTs, how would the council join up, for instance, with a CLT to look at this sort of thing? You know, to actually progress. If we had some land, for instance, I might know some things. If we had some land, affordable land, how would we engage with CLT or a CLT to do this sort of thing, to actually build affordable housing as a town council?
Well, I think first things first, I would say most you to Cumbria, where there's some really good work happening there, where the local authorities are involved. Actually, the Homes and Communities Agency staff have been really involved in helping plan the scheme as well. So it's not just the local authority, the wider public bodies are helping there as well. I think I'll be honest, a lot of my experience is in urban areas, so the challenge is working with local authorities around the assets that they own and helping them think through whether they want to transfer or not. So I think a local authority that comes to the table and is willing to sit down with a community group and say, these are the assets that we've got, let's have a kind of constructive discussion about what can happen. It might be a CLT, it might be something more like self-help housing on shorter leases, but to kind of approach those conversations with groups that are interested with an open mind and a willingness to use your assets, I'd say.
Well, we've got at the moment, we've got some things that we're looking at. Obviously, all the housing was transferred to a company, 1973, I think it was, called In Communities. So all the housing stock went there. Now, as it stands, with the government bond scheme, you'll be aware of that, I'm sure, for housing. Right? I understand that the In Communities was given the right by the district council to allocate the bond scheme, to dish that out to the people who actually needed to get into affordable housing, i.e. to cover the deposits and things like that for them running them. And that money is now no longer available because they ring fence it, they spend it on other things. So we were looking at something like possibly going into partnership with someone in our area and build some affordable housing. Now, we're looking at different ways to go about it, and I was just wondering if that might be something. It's obviously something we would need to look at, you know, with the CLT, on the CLT, and possibly do it that way. Whichever's the best, you know, the cheapest and the best. But I mean, obviously, if there's some funding there again, then everybody's in for funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's not much to add to that other than consider it, draw on the resources that are in the CLT sector, because there is lots of experience of using that model to develop.
Are you available to come to Keith and speak?
I would be willing to, yeah. Just drop me an email.
Perhaps I've had to come to
yeah.
lunch or something, yeah. So, anyone else?
Hi, Julie Story from Churches Conservation Trust. I'm looking at this from a slightly different angle, and my question is really around whether community land trusts are specifically for housing, or whether you would see that there might be an application in using community land trust for the transfer of the ownership of the church building. I work on the regeneration task force, and we have many urban areas, churches that are specifically targeted because their congregation has dwindled, they've been closed, they've invested with the trust, and we are struggling to maintain them. Most of our work is done through visitor income and donations and on that basis. And we don't have enough money to look after all our churches. So we're starting to target these urban churches, look at communities, see if there's a need that can be met, and then we're really feeling our way through working out how the community then take on the management of the building and what legal structure that may take or not. So do you think that there's an application for community land trusts?
It's interesting you said that, because one of the groups that we work with, which is in regeneration, has been approached as to whether they want to take the church. So it's not something that I've worked on before, but it's something that I've heard about. I think the answer really lies in dividing up the tradition of CLTs in the UK against the concept. The concept is just a legal model for ownership of land, basically. It's just that in England in particular, it's predominantly housing. There are CLTs that manage woodland, for instance.
Is it a cooperative then?
It can take three legal forms. It can be a charity, it can be a community interest company, or it can be a bank, like an industrial province, which is the cooperative model.
So effectively, so it can't be limited by guarantee then.
It can be.
So it's effectively it's a bit like a social enterprise. It's a description of another legal entity, really.
Yeah, I think it's just a legal definition that was attached to a specific subset. So it's very complicated, but it's just a legal definition.
I'm just confused a bit. I'll say why, because that's one of the things I thought was curious, that the community land trust, as you say, is potentially a very broad thing, but in England it's always assumed to be about affordable housing, and in other countries it's not. Any idea why? I mean, in a sentence, is there a reason for that?
Well, yeah, success breeds success,
Yeah.
and the early CLTs were tackling housing, and not even just housing, affordable housing in high land value areas. That was almost the majority of the CLT movement in the UK. So a number of groups were successful, and it expanded from there. That doesn't set the parameters for what CLTs can be, I think, and we will witness it will become more plural.
Just want to bring anybody else in. Pam, is there anything, any observations you've got?
My only observation is from 30 years of having people talking about, in ever increasing, excited tones, community empowerment, community engagement, volunteer, I mean, there ain't enough people. People just, words are cheap, is what I think. I think words are cheap, and I think there is a need to, given these days of austerity, and it's not going to get any better, and personal responsibility needing to rise right up the agenda, there's absolutely a need for everything we've been talking about today. There is absolutely no investment in the capacity to be able to do that whatsoever. So it will peak with those that want to do it, and then it will stop. And unless we actually start to invest in that groundswell, which is why we do what we do, so that people start to see what's happening in a context of, yeah, I can get involved. It's not just for, as I might say, the Guardian and the Telegraph readers. Unless people actually have a sense of that across the piece on their estates or whatever, it's going to be a really great blip that doesn't get anywhere near where it ought to get. So I am really pretty agitated about this complete lack of honesty. And we heard it today, I think, with some of the presentations, that not only is it a liability or an asset, question mark, but actually, who are these people that are going to come out in the vast droves to actually do this? It's possible. People are magnificent. Small actions are amazing. But we need to be a lot more honest and do a lot more preparatory work before we can expect people to do some of the big stuff that we're talking about.
The gentleman at the back, been waiting a long time.
My name's Mick Marston. I work for the Federation of City Farms and Community Gardens. I just wanted to give a plug for a new service that we've launched called the Community Land Advisory Service, and it's basically it kind of fills that gap where people need not necessarily permission, but they need to kind of have some framework for kind of meanwhile use, but then they may be needing some help in terms of a legal form, land form that they may be looking at. And obviously we know that that costs a lot of money. If you walk into any agent, land agent, solicitors, whatever, the clock's ticking. So what we're doing is the service is about providing models and providing examples so people can actually see what other people have done, giving people templates that they can actually use. So they're kind of up the scale in terms of in their negotiation. We all know that people will have to have these things checked out legally. You know, no one would do any other. But there's nothing worse than starting with an idea and a blank sheet of paper. So the idea is fill the piece of paper in. It's got a website. If you type Community Land Advisory Service, it's operating in Scotland and it's operating in England. It's only new, but the staff are there basically to help you do what you want to do with a piece of land.
Jim Brown from Baker Brown Associates. There's two sort of points I'd like to just raise. The first one is a matter of detail about the claim that these assets are held in perpetuity. I mean, I don't know on what basis that's ever said, and I hear it repeated over and over again where people are confusing asset locks with assets being held in perpetuity. An asset lock doesn't mean that you can't sell the asset. It means what you can do with the value that's the money that's gathered from that. And I think that's a very. I mean,
I did say that you can, if it's for the benefit of that community, you can.
It's just that it's on your slide, and I regularly get groups who are motivated by the idea that this land or this building will never be sold again, and it will always be owned by the community. And it's such a misleading concept. You know, I mean, you can do that. You can put deeds of trust on buildings and property that will create that, but an asset lock in a organisation doesn't create that effect. And I think it's a big misunderstanding that's repeated over and over again. And I think it would be helpful to start undoing that one. The other thing, the broader point I wanted to raise, which I mean, I do a lot of work around community investment, community shares, and CLTs. There are about. You're quite right in saying there's about, I think, 25 or 30 community benefit societies, of which about 10 or 12 are looking at community shares as a way forward. I mean, some, like Ford Hall Farm, which has done it and has raised a lot of money and bought a farm on that basis, but it's remained largely underdeveloped. And I think one of the big concerns is that the problem isn't with, the problem is to do with the housing market being completely overinflated in terms of asset values, and that going into this market is a very, very big problem for us all, because actually the bigger problem is house prices are way too high compared to the state of the economy, and everybody has got a lot of pain to come at some point or other when that starts to unwind, and it's showing no sign of unwinding yet. But I mean, what really worries me is about how entering into that market, what we've got to try and do, I think, is work out ways we can capture value, so that it's not really, the focus isn't really on finance, the focus is more on organising communities so they can benefit from the creation of value, which for me would be about transforming land that is currently not designated for building into getting building designation on that through community plans. And I think it can be done, but it's a very, very big ask. And I think that's where really we should be devoting our energies, is working out how we can bring communities together to get land redesignated for housing use in a way that the community can then benefit from the value that's created through that. Because otherwise I just don't see how it's all going to stack up.
Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Jim is one of the speakers in the workshop on community shares this afternoon, so he'll probably be able to anyone else?
Good comment, it's always really interesting and really inspiring to see examples where people just kind of got on and done stuff without too much of the fuss. I've seen a few examples, primarily in quite rural, sort of small town village communities. I've seen far less examples in kind of urban environments of being able to just kind of mobilise communities to get on and do stuff and step forward. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of why there isn't more examples, perhaps, because of the approach that we've taken in other areas, in particular urban.
Yeah, okay, I can answer that really quickly, which is, we have a victim mentality. We wait for someone else to do it. It's what we do. There's always a reason, there's never enough money, somebody's not giving us a form, or whatever, okay? To change that mindset takes a long time. And you need to have very specific examples where you can say, have a look at this, you can. Now, you don't start climbing the north wall of the Eiger, do you, when you've never ever walked up a flight of stairs. You start with what's possible. And what's possible is people that have a strong sense of place, where they think, yeah, I can. And what's possible is the things you can get your hands on, and I happen to live in Torres, so you get your hands on top. So it starts off with small places in order to show people it is possible. And once you've done that, if you put enough time into the equation, and that's the other side of it, not only are we a victim society, but we're a society that thinks it can all be done within 12 months. This takes a long, 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 long time. It's really unpopular, that's why politicians don't like it, because, you know, they're going to be they could be 6 foot under for all I know by the time you actually start to see the benefits. But it is the only way forward. So, we've now got 33 places in England doing similar places, similar things. They're not all small towns, you know, some of them. Got some people in Wakefield doing it, in Accrington, in Hoylake, we've got some people on the Isle of Wight. I'm going to Leytonstone in London on Saturday, I'm going to Sheffield tomorrow. On Sunday I'm going to Sheffield tomorrow. So we are starting, but it isn't about taking a city, it's about taking the place. It's about taking your neighbourhood, it's about taking your borough. And therefore, anywhere where that community learning and business can come together is where you can start to take over space and start to immediately see the benefits of that and work out for yourself then what the next stages are. And for me, that's it. That's where it comes in. It's not about the game plan, it's about saying, what do I need next? I need skills. What do I need next? I need tools. What do I need next? Then I need some finance. And it will come to cities because people are ready for change. And no politicians delivering it. I'm really sorry.
Can I just add
Please do. We're virtually on lunchtime. We've got about 1 minute, so.
What's been interesting over the last year is that the groups that have approached people have been those that have been fighting councils to prevent demolition. And what's fascinating about that is that they're already energised, they're already highly kind of organised. And that is an asset in itself to work with. So there is prospects for everything.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to end. I think we you know, what's come across to me is you know, you start with the opportunities, and the opportunities might be a piece of land by a canal, or it might be the failure of a housing market renewal project in some major inner city area, which is scales are different, but they're both opportunities. And you start with the community, and the community can manage, and you have to build up from there. So with that, can I thank you all very much for coming.